Yes.
And today, we're diving into something really interesting you sent over, a framework called REdefine.
That's right. And our mission, really, for this deep dive is to properly unravel what REdefine Imaginify is saying about, the heart of creativity, what actually sparks imagination.
Okay.
It's definitely more than just like a list of ideas. It gives us a specific way, a framework for understanding how different inputs fuel creative output.
Yeah.
It really pushes us to look past the usual stuff.
So as we started looking into REdefine Imaginify, one of the first things that kind of jumped out was how important where you are can be. Where does it start with environments?
Yeah, it's pretty foundational. The sources make it clear it's not just about finding a nice place or a quiet spot. It actually emphasizes environments that shake up your routine or ones that give you totally new sensory experiences, things that jolt your mind out of its usual tracks.
And it specifically mentions liminal spaces. Okay, for our listener, what exactly are those? Why are they supposedly so powerful for creativity?
That's a great question because it's a bit counterintuitive, isn't it? Liminal spaces are those sort of in-between places.
Like airports, waiting rooms.
Exactly. Airport terminals, train stations, maybe even a laundromat, waiting rooms. They're not destinations, they're transitions.
Okay.
And the argument REdefine Imaginify puts forward is that in these spots, you're kind of stripped of your usual routines, your responsibilities, familiar surroundings.
Right, the everyday stuff.
Yeah, so your mind isn't carrying that normal cognitive load. It's almost like hitting a mental reset button.
Huh?
Without all the usual cues and demands, your brain is just freer. It can wander, get into a more diffuse thinking mode, letting ideas that seem unrelated kind of bump into each other.
Making new connections.
Exactly. Connections it wouldn't normally make. It's that deliberate disruption that, clears the mental canvas.
That is genuinely fascinating. So less about the perfect quiet study and more about deliberately breaking the pattern, almost forcing your brain into like productive disorientation.
Precisely that.
What other kinds of environmental triggers does it talk about?
Well, alongside that disruption, there's also nature. The source material links being in nature to inspiration through something it calls effortless attention.
Effortless attention. Okay, explain that one. Is it like when you're just sort of watching waves or clouds?
Yeah, or leaves moving.
Yeah, you're paying attention, but it doesn't feel like work, not like studying.
You've absolutely got it. It's about shifting away from what psychologists call directed attention, the kind that's mentally draining, uses your prefrontal cortex heavily,
Right.
towards a more fascination-based attention. This gentle, almost automatic focus on natural things. A sunset, forest, sounds, the pattern on a leaf, it lets the executive parts of your brain rest.
Okay.
And REdefine Imaginify suggests this relaxed state actually reduces mental fatigue. It opens up what it calls cognitive space.
Cognitive space for imaginative thinking.
Exactly. It's like a mental recovery that gets the mind ready for new ideas.
Okay, so we've got the deliberate disruption of liminal spaces, that mental freedom, and then this restorative open state you get from effortless attention in nature.
Yeah.
Both framed as key environmental triggers. They set the stage.
Key triggers, yeah. REdefine Imaginify presents them not just as places to be, but as active, almost catalytic ingredients for your mind, preparing it for, the deeper creative work.
Okay, let's unpack this more. We've got the environment setting the stage, but REdefine Imaginify also goes deep into the inputs, right? What you feed your creative engine. What did you find there?
Yeah, a big chunk of the sources focuses on input from other creative works, books, movies, art, music, even architecture, you name it.
Right.
But here's the key thing. It's not about just passively consuming them. REdefine Imaginify brings up this really compelling idea, narrative cross-pollination.
Narrative cross-pollination. That sounds cool. What does the source actually mean by that? It sounds more active than just enjoying a story.
It is. It suggests actively, intentionally seeking out stories, visual styles, even ways of thinking from really different, sometimes seemingly incompatible areas.
So not just what you like, but things that challenge you.
Exactly. Things that stretch your mental boundaries, push you outside your usual consumption habits.
Okay, give me an example. What might that look like in practice, according to this?
Well, imagine reading, say, a really dense philosophical sci-fi novel, maybe about AI or societal collapse.
Okay.
And then right after, deliberately immersing yourself in, vibrant emotional Renaissance paintings.
Whoa, okay. Big contrast.
Or maybe studying the complex structure of classical music and then trying to apply those patterns, tension, release to a business problem you're working on. It's about that intentional juxtaposition, that mental friction.
So it's not about finding similarities. It's about forcing a kind of mental collision, creative dissonance.
Precisely. The source material argues that making your brain grapple with these really different forms and ideas, the logic of sci-fi versus the symbolic expression of Renaissance art, it actually creates new neural pathways.
Right.
It sparks insights you just wouldn't get if you stayed in one genre, one discipline. So yeah, it's the clash, the collision of these different creative ideas that's surprisingly productive. It generates novelty from that unexpected mix.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting for me. So it's not just appreciating great work.
Yeah.
It's like actively using it as raw material, mixing and matching to spark something totally new. It sounds like you're being told to be a sort of creative alchemist for your own brain.
A creative alchemist. I like that. Yes. REdefine Imaginify really pushes that active engagement. It frames creativity less as, pulling something out of thin air and more like a process of synthesis transformation. And it flat out states that this process needs rich, varied inputs to work.
Yeah.
It's about building, not just conjuring. You're not waiting for inspiration. You're constructing it.
By feeding your internal architect these diverse, maybe even clashing elements.
Exactly.
That really changes how you might think about just watching a movie or reading a book. It's not just downtime. It could be active creative work.
Potentially, yes.
The sources seem to be saying, be a curator for your own brain. Design your own intellectual landscape, consciously.
A curator of inputs, absolutely. And also being mindful of where you are, what state of mind those places encourage, the liminal spaces, the power of nature.
Right, setting the stage.
Yeah, setting the stage both internally and externally so these creative collisions can actually happen.
And combining that with intentionally going after diverse art, diverse stories, it feels very proactive, almost strategic.
That combination, the curated environment and the curated input, that seems to be where REdefine Imaginify, suggests the real creative spark ignites. It's dynamic.
It's about creating the best conditions for your internal architect to do its thing.
To work its magic, yeah.
Okay, so we've established that REdefine Imaginify sees creativity as this synthesis transformation, needing rich, varied inputs.
Yeah.
It's about crafting novelty, which naturally makes me think about today's world.
The digital world.
Exactly. So much of our creative output now gets shared through algorithms, right? Things designed for pattern recognition. So how does this internal architect who's creating truly novel stuff from this productive clash, how do those ideas break through the noise of algorithmic prediction? Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. It's a really critical modern question, an extension of this framework. And REdefine Imaginify, well, it implicitly touches on this through its focus on novelty. It actually inspired this little research riddle. Think about this. I feast on signals, a digital stream, predicting patterns, a data-driven dream. But one thing eludes me, a human spark so deep. The new synthesis born while the old patterns sleep. I can push what's known, connect like a web. But the leap of true insight, how can I ebb? And flow with a mind that collides what I keep. What am I, and what secret does the internal architect keep from my grasp?
Wow, that riddle nails the tension, doesn't it? The algorithm is built for what is, recognizing existing patterns, optimizing for them.
Right.
But the internal architect, like REdefine Imaginify describes, is all about crafting what isn't yet, making new patterns from clashing elements. So how can something genuinely new, unpredictable, how does it even register, let alone resonate, in a system built on prediction?
It really highlights how algorithms are, well, they're brilliant at amplification and optimization within the known zones. They love predictable signals.
Yeah.
But the internal architect's whole power lies in disrupting those zones, right? Creating something truly new through that synthesis transformation. It kind of suggests that maybe the most compelling, the most lasting creative work might be exactly what an algorithm struggles to predict.
Interesting thought.
It makes me think of this short poem reflecting on that. The Architect's Code. From liminal pause where old paths unwind, to nature's soft gaze, a wandering mind. The architect gathers from disparate lands, not what fits, but what challenges demands. A sci-fi's stark logic with Renaissance grace, colliding, combining, finding new space. The output a whisper, a roar, or a gleam. A unique creation beyond a mere dream. The network may chart it, predict, and then share, but the spark in the silence, it builds from thin air.
That's beautiful. It really brings it home the idea that Redefine Imaginify suggests the best stuff comes from that curated environment and curated input, leading to something totally new through synthesis transformation. The framework really hits home that creativity isn't just pulling things randomly out of thin air. It's more like a process of synthesis transformation, but it needs rich, varied inputs to work.
Exactly. It's a proactive, almost deliberate cultivation of novelty.
Which brings us, I guess, to a final thought for this deep dive, something linking all this back to the challenges creators face now, especially online. If the internal architect generates truly novel ideas by embracing this productive clash, this unexpected cross-pollination, how can you, the listener, actually use this understanding? How can you create stuff that's not only true to your vision, but also somehow breaks through the algorithmic noise to achieve genuine, organic virality?
That's the big question, isn't it? Does the algorithm, searching for patterns, end up suppressing the truly novel output? Or could it, maybe unexpectedly, amplify it?
A powerful question to mull over for your own creative work, definitely.